Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. Maybe you've walked down a street with bay windows and brick chimneys. Maybe you've passed a grand old doorway framed with stained glass and thought, wow, that looks old. But was it Victorian? Was it Edwardian? Or was it just pretending to be either? The difference, though subtle, can tell you stories about soot-stained skylines, stubborn architects, and a world where the front door mattered almost as much as the family that walked through it. But don't worry, you won't need a history degree to enjoy this one. Before we step inside, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel across time zone. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background. Let your phone rest gently on your pillow or nightstand. Breathe. And let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey: how to tell if your house is Victorian or Edwardian. No quizzes, no pressure, just a quiet, candle-lit stroll through time, with the occasional crumbling cornice and a few mismatched chimney pots. Imagine it. You're standing in front of a house. It has bricks, lots of bricks, maybe a bay window, maybe a turret, if it's feeling dramatic. There's a door with coloured glass, some floral tiles on the floor, a doorknob that doesn't quite sit right. It feels old, solid, like it was built during a time when things weren't just made, they were crafted. But what time exactly? The Victorian era, named after Queen Victoria, spanned from 1837 to 1901. 64 years of industrial upheaval, expanding railways, mass-produced everything, and the slow invention of middle-class pride. The houses were grand, or tried to be. They wore their status in their windows, their railings, their red bricks, and their rooftops. Ornate, eclectic, sometimes a bit chaotic, like the period that birthed them. Then came the Edwardians, from 1901 to 1910 officially, but their influence lingered until the First World War. The houses they built looked similar, but they breathed differently. Simpler lines, bigger windows, less soot, more light. A soft rebellion against Victorian gloom. If Victorian houses whispered, Edwardian ones opened the door and said, "You're welcome to come in, as long as you wipe your boots." But here's the secret. Most people, even those who live in one, have no idea which is which. They just know it feels old, comfortable, maybe a little haunted. And that's what makes this quiet journey so soothing. Tonight, we won't just define these homes, we'll live in them. We'll walk their creaky hallways, feel the scratch of horsehair plaster under fading wallpaper, light a gas lamp that hisses more than it illuminates. We'll sit in a parlour where tea is always cooling, and the upholstery smells faintly of damp roses and second-hand coal. You're not just learning, you're there. So lie back. Let your thoughts float with chimney smoke and laundry lines. Let the bricks rise around you. Let the windows close gently against the fog. The modern world can wait, because tonight you live in history. You open your eyes to pale morning light filtering through heavy, dusty curtains. There's a chill in the room, sharp, still, and unmistakably old. Not just winter morning cold. This is no insulation, no central heating, and the fireplace went out hours ago. Kind of cold. You're not in your bed anymore. You're in a different century entirely. The ceiling above you is high and oddly decorative. It has a sort of plaster rose in the center, meant to distract the eye from the slow water stain creeping outwards. The walls are covered in floral wallpaper, once bold, now faded into a brownish bloom of time and mildew. The pattern repeats like a mantra, beauty repeated until it forgets why it began. You're lying on a mattress that's far too thin for how high the bed island. The wooden frame is ornately carved, probably mahogany or oak, with curved legs and a high headboard that rises like a judgment behind your pillow. Everything feels solid and heavy, sturdy in that way. Only furniture from a bygone age ever island. The sheets? They're not soft. They're starchy and slightly damp. You smell laundry soap, the kind made with lye and elbow grease. Beneath that, something older. Smoke, lavender sachets, dust, mothballs, and the lingering memory of someone else's perfume. The blanket is thick wool, woven with a pattern that seems to bristle at being touched. It scratches your chin if you pull it too high. But you do anyway, because the room has no warmth. Somewhere, faintly, you hear the distant tick-tick-tick of a long-case clock. It's comforting and haunting at the same time. A heartbeat of time you don't recognize. There is no alarm, no phone buzzing, just the silence of an old house holding its breath. Your room is narrow, but tall. The window is large, but curtained heavily, like it's trying to keep the century out. One of the curtains is pulled back just enough to let in a sliver of grey daylight, filtered through glass that warps the view ever so slightly. The kind of glass that isn't quite flat because it's not modern. It distorts the trees outside into something wobbly and shivering. You try to shift beneath the blanket, but the mattress lets out a small creak. Not a polite creak. A long, accusatory one. The kind that says, "Yes, we all heard that." Your feet slip out from under the covers and immediately regret it. The floor is wood unpolished, uneven, and unforgiving. You wiggle your toes across a thin rug that's more decorative than useful. Its pattern is complicated and fraying at the edges, like someone who's been trying too hard for too long. You search the room. There's a wardrobe in the corner, tall, dark, and looming. It probably has a coat inside. It probably also has a secret. All wardrobes from this era do, whether it's Narnia or a hidden compartment with someone's war medals. You're not sure. You decide not to open it yet. You're not emotionally ready for Edwardian furniture-based mysteries before breakfast. To your left, a small washstand with a porcelain basin and jug. The water inside is cold. No plumbing in this room, at least not modern plumbing. You splash your face and wince. The chill is bracing but necessary. Soap sits nearby in a cracked dish, yellowed and worn like it's seen too many winters. The mirror above the basin is cloudy. It doesn't show your reflection so much as suggest it. A smudged version of you peers back, framed by a gilded edge with hairline fractures that branch like frost on a window pane. You look like you belong here. Slightly unkempt, slightly overwhelmed, and possibly late for something involving boiled eggs and a very awkward family breakfast. You step toward the fireplace. It's made of cast iron, with tiles inset along the front. They're hand-painted, tiny birds, flowers, ivy. The coals have gone grey. A few still glow faintly, like memories refusing to fade. There's no central heating. No radiator, just this little hearth, once the heart of the room, now slumbering. The air is thick with the ghost of smoke. Not unpleasant, just present. A smoky aroma, with undertones of polish, dried roses, and the occasional faint whiff of coal gas. You sniff the air and catch something else. Toast, far off. Not modern toast. Toast made under a grill or over a fire. And maybe bacon, or maybe that's just your imagination being generous. You hear footsteps, not yours, not modern. They echo faintly, heels on wood, deliberate and slow. Somewhere below, a bell rings. Not a phone bell, a service bell. Sharp, metallic, and full of expectation. The kind of bell that means someone's waiting, probably for you. The house is waking up. Pipes groan, distant doors creak open and then shut with a sigh. You hear someone speaking in the hallway, a murmur, British accent, possibly grumpy, possibly your uncle or someone else with a monocle and opinions about breakfast etiquette, and still you're standing here in bare feet, trying to piece it together. Victorian or Edwardian, the house gives you clues. The cornices are heavy, floral, like Victorian excess. But the door frames are simpler, cleaner, possibly Edwardian practicality. The stained glass on the stairwell window catches your eye. Geometric patterns, not overly ornate, more Edwardian than Gothic. But then again, the moulding on the hallway arch is pure late Victorian, overdone, slightly anxious. The house is a mix. Like many, it straddles 2 centuries. A Victorian shell, slowly updated by Edwardian hands. The transition is everywhere, soot and gaslight yielding to sunlight and space. It's not one or the other. It's both. It's the moment in time when coal smoke gave way to cleaner skies, when doilies and antimacassars were replaced by light, lace and wicker chairs. But you're not thinking about architectural theory right now. You're thinking about how the floor is cold, and how your slippers, if they exist, are probably 2 rooms away. You wonder how long you'll have to keep pretending you know which side of the house gets the morning sundae. You're not fully awake yet, and neither is the house, but you're here now, in a time not your own, wrapped in the cotton wool haze of a past you didn't choose, but that somehow fits you just right. Your day hasn't started yet, but the house is waiting. It always island. You shuffle downstairs in slippers you're no longer sure are yours. The hallway is long, dim, and smells like carpet that's been through at least 3 historical periods and 1 small flood. The wallpaper has patterns that might be flowers, or possibly sea creatures. It's hard to tell. They repeat down the wall like they're judging you. The stairs creak. Of course they do. They're wooden, narrow, and built before the invention of subtlety. Each step speaks your weight in the language of Edwardian disapproval. You descend slowly because you have to. The banister is cold. The light from the front door leaks in weakly, landing on tiled floors red and black, geometric, like a checkerboard built for ghosts. The kind of hallway where umbrellas are stored in copper stands, and someone is always just about to arrive, but never quite does. You turn into the kitchen. It's not the kitchen you know. It's not open plan. It's not sleek. It's a narrow room with a low ceiling, yellow walls, and an agar stove that's probably been there longer than electricity. The smell of burnt toast is sharp in the air, paired with something vaguely egg-shaped and distressingly greasy. A kettle rattles on the hob, shrieking faintly like it's warning you about the future. There's a sink, one of those old Belfast types, deep and chipped, with brass taps that groan when turned and spit water at inconsistent speeds. Cold only. The hot tap is a rumour, started during the Great Exhibition and never quite proven. Above the sink is a window, small, smudged, with condensation gathered along the bottom edge. Through it, you can see the garden or the overgrown rectangle that was once a garden. A single wooden chair sits beneath a rose bush that has grown wild, and now leans toward the window like it's trying to gossip. On the table, breakfast, if you can call it that. 2 thick slices of bread, now slightly blackened on one side, curl awkwardly on a plate that's seen better glazes. The butter is stiff and impossible to spread without tearing the bread into a postmodern sculpture. The marmalade is generous in peel, cruel in texture. The eggs are somewhere between boiled and neglected. Tea waits in a ceramic pot that weighs as much as a newborn lamb. The table is worn oat, scratched, stained, and scattered with toast crumbs, sugar grains, and a folded copy of the Times from a year nobody remembers fondly. You sit. The chair wobbles. Not from instability, but out of historical obligation. You pour yourself some tea. The milk is in a small jug that has seen unspeakable things. The sugar is in a bowl with a tiny silver spoon, ornate and inexplicably sticky. You take a sip. It's strong. Stronger than modern tea. Strong enough to wake the dead and make them question their life choices. This isn't tea as a beverage. This is tea as infrastructure. A structural support system for the early 20th century. The toast, as predicted, is both burnt and cold. You chew it slowly, thoughtfully. It's not delicious, but it's familiar. In a house like this, food isn't about pleasure. It's about rhythm, about ritual, about something warm to hold while the windows rattle and the frost creeps under the doors. And the hygiene? Let's talk about that. There is no bathroom upstairs. That luxury, if it exists, is tacked on at the back of the house, accessible through a short hallway with uneven floors and wallpaper that looks embarrassed to still be there. The bathroom is chilly, always. Even in summer, it feels like the inside of a stone teacup left out in the rain. There's a clawfoot tub, stained slightly at the base, with faucets that squeak like a guilt-ridden mouse. Hot water comes from a tank in the attic, if it comes at all. You have to turn it on early, wait half an hour, and then race the laws of thermodynamics before the temperature drops again. There's a bar of soap. No branding, just beige. It smells vaguely medicinal, like something a Victorian doctor might use to wash their conscience. You scrub your hands, splash your face, and try to ignore the sensation that someone in the 1,890 seconds also did exactly this while contemplating a war. Your toothbrush, if you even have one, is a bristly thing, possibly horsehair, certainly ineffective. The toothpaste is chalky, mint adjacent, and comes in a tin so dented it should be in a museum. If you're not brushing, you might be swishing with salt water or chewing a twig, yes, really. Oral hygiene was creative and optional. The mirror above the sink reflects your face with a kind of passive judgment. The silver backing is blotchy, the frame is warped, but you're there, dimly. There's no shower. Of course not. Bathing means filling the tub manually, checking the water temperature like it might bite, then sinking into a bath that is either too hot or too cold, never just right. You wash quickly, or slowly, or not at all. It depends on the day, the mood, and whether the boiler is in a good mood. The towel is stiff, not because it's old though it is, but because it dried on a line in the garden, in the wind, and it now has the absorbency of sandpaper and the warmth of a grudge. Your hair, if you wash it, takes hours to dry. There's no hairdryer, just a towel and prayer. You wrap it up like a turban and sit by the stove, hoping not to catch fire. And finally, your hands, rough, red, and tired, from the cold water and harsh soap. You rub them together and look around the room. Everything is clean, but not sterile, scrubbed, but not shiny. There's an honesty here, a kind of raw practicality. The house is too old to care about luxury. It only promises survival. Breakfast is over. You rise. The chair sighs beneath you. You're clean enough, fed enough, awake enough. The day is beginning. And the house, this oddly familiar structure of tile and timber, is ready to reveal itself, one room at a time. And somewhere in the back of your mind, as the wind taps lightly on the frosted window pane, you ask yourself the question again, Victorian or Edwardian? And the house, full of secrets and steam, smiles quietly and refuses to answer. The bedroom is cold again, somehow colder than before. You'd think moving around would help, but all it's done is wake up the floorboards, which now groan dramatically with every step you take. They want you to know you are not alone. This house is watching. Your wardrobe is open now. Inside, the clothes, not folded in drawers, not tumbling out of a walk-in closet, but hanging like spectral figures from brass hooks. Shirts with stiff collars, coats so heavy they could double as armor, petticoats, crinolines, a corset you hope isn't yours, and a hat that looks like it has too many opinions about how society should function. You choose something simple, but simple here is complicated. Layer 1, a chemise, soft cotton, modest, possibly sleepwear, possibly just an apology for what comes next. Layer 2, stays or corset. It's stiff, laced, and whispering. Hope you didn't plan on breathing today. You pull it tight, not because you want to, but because that's how the silhouette works. You are being shaped, not dressed. This isn't fashion, it's historical compression. Layer 3, a blouse. High neck, ruffled, with buttons so small they might as well be theoretical. You fumble with them for 10 minutes before declaring victory over 2. Good enough. Layer 4, a skirt. Long, heavy, wool or linen or some ancestral blend of itches. It swishes as you walk, but not in a romantic way, in a "this thing will knock over a chair if I turn too fast" kind of way. If it's Victorian, the skirt is structured, pleated, and unforgiving. If it's Edwardian, there's slightly more give, more flow, less concern that your ankles might scandalize someone. Then boots. They're leather, laced up to the ankle. The heels are practical but unkind. You feel like you're about to either conquer the moors or fall down the stairs. A coat? Yes, it's lined in fur, or at least what used to be fur, and it weighs as much as your sense of social obligation. There's no such thing as light outerwear here. This is the 1900s. You go out dressed for battle with the elements, with society, with stairs. A hat is essential. In Victorian times, women's hats are vast and fluffy. Feathers, flowers, maybe a small taxidermied bird. Edwardian hats are neater, still dramatic, but with purpose. It's not just a hat, it's a message. I have arrived, and yes, that's real lace. For men, it's simpler in theory, but only in theory. Your trousers are high-waisted, held up by braces, and scratchy enough to keep you awake during Parliament. Your shirt is white, crisp, and already yellowing at the cuffs despite being freshly laundered yesterday. There's a waistcoat, naturally, and then the overcoat, a thick wool behemoth with lapels large enough to shade a small dog. And yes, you wear a cravat, or a tie, or something that vaguely resembles a fabric commitment. You check the mirror again. You are presentable. You are deeply uncomfortable. And this is what passing as well-dressed looks like in a time where appearance is everything, and laundry is done by hand, boiled in copper pots, and beaten with a stick by someone who probably hates you. You move back through the house. Each room has its own climate. Some are musty and warm, others are arctic and filled with mysterious breezes that have no origin. Now we turn to the house itself. Shelter, in theory. In practice, an aesthetic labyrinth of poor insulation and very heavy doors. Let's talk walls. In a Victorian house, they're thick, solid brick, plastered inside, and probably covered in ornate wallpaper. Nothing is smooth. Everything has texture. The wallpaper itself might be William Morris or Morris adjacent. Swirls of botanical ambition in green and ochre and burgundy. Patterns designed to distract you from how damp the plaster is underneath. If it's Edwardian, the walls are lighter in tone. Creams, pale greens, duck egg blue. The patterns soften. Nature is still there, but it's less aggressive, less. The ferns have taken over the parlor, more. Let's take tea in the sunlight. Carving runs along the ceiling's molded plaster, curved and delicate, cornices above doorways. Everything is framed, bordered, contained. Even the ceilings have opinion. You look up and feel slightly judged by the decorative medallion at the center. It knows you haven't dusted the chandelier. Now, the floors, downstairs, it's tile or wood. In grander homes, parquet. In smaller ones, whatever could be nailed down without complaint. Upstairs, floorboards, sometimes bare, sometimes covered with thin rugs, always cold, always creaking, always betraying your location. The windows are tall, sash-style, and drafty enough to freeze a teacup. You can feel the wind negotiating with the frame. There's no double glazing, just a single pane of wobbly, slightly distorted glass that rattles every time someone coughs outside. In a Victorian home, windows are often tucked behind heavy drapes, dark velvet, tasseled, dramatic. They weren't just decoration. They were insulation, status symbols, and probably good at trapping ghosts. Edwardian windows are freer, brighter. You'll find stained glass panels in soft pastels, roses, tulips, geometric designs. Sunlight filters through like you're living inside a watercolor painting, and still cold, because the chimney is the only thing providing heat, and only in the rooms where someone remembers to light the fire. The rest of the house is a museum of slow frostbite. You pass the sitting room, there's a faint smell of smoke and old books. The furniture is heavy, too heavy, meant to last 100 years and then some. Chairs with carved legs and floral upholstery that resents your modern weight. A settee with springs that bite. The cushions are embroidered. The embroidery is fading, but the phrase "home sweet home" still lingers. In the corner, a gas lamp, converted from oil. It doesn't work, but it looks lovely. And finally, the doors, tall, heavy, hinges that creak like stage actors, dork knobs that chill your hand when touched. Some doors lead to closets, some lead to servants' stairs, some lead nowhere at all, sealed up decades ago for reasons no one remembers. In a Victorian house, privacy is sacred. Rooms are closed off, compartmentalized. Each space has a function, and you're meant to stay in your assigned one. Drawing room, smoking room, morning room, it's all very labeled. Edwardian layouts begin to loosen, walls open, archways appear. The obsession with division softens. Rooms begin to breathe. Parlors turn into living room. Kitchens, once hidden, start to emerge as part of the home's daily life. But no matter the layout, the age, the decor, every part of the house makes a sound. Pipes moan, radiators rattle, windows whistle, and the floor, oh the floor, it speaks. Not words, but warnings. Step lightly, it says. This house remembers things, and you believe it because you are now fully dressed, cold, upright, and aware that both your shoes and your ceiling have historical significance. You are not just a visitor. Not anymore. You're inside history now, and it's wearing 5 layers and refuses to be centrally heated. You may be wearing lace. You may be wearing a waistcoat. But don't be fooled. This house, with its pretty cornices and stained glass windows, is not a passive thing. It's alive. It breathes in dust and breathes out work. The kind of work that starts early, never ends, and politely ruins your spine before tea. You don't live here. You maintain here, and the difference is everything. Let's begin with the morning chores. The ones that exist even before the world begins, pretending it's civilized. If you're a housemaid, or just the unfortunate soul occupying the lowest rung of the family hierarchy, you're already up. Before sunrise, before coffee, before joy. You're hauling coal. There's a metal scuttle beside every fireplace, and it's your job to fill it. Not once, not twice, every day, every room. Coal is heavy, coal is filthy. It gets under your fingernails and into your lungs. And it's not optional, because without coal, the fires die. And when the fires die, the family starts asking questions. So you carry it one bucket at a time, up and down stairs that were designed by someone who clearly hated knees. You try not to spill. You try not to cough. You try not to drop a single lump on the hall carpet, because coal dust is the glitter of the Victorian world. Impossible to clean and always noticed. Then the grates. Each fireplace must be cleaned of last night's ashes. You kneel. You scrape. You sweep. You curse softly into your apron, because no one tells you this in history books. But fireplaces don't just provide warmth, they provide suffering. Once that's done, it's time to polish everything. The brass, the banisters, the door handles, the boots. Brass polish smells like vinegar and despair. It stains your sleeves. You rub until your wrists ache, and the metal shines like the illusion of prosperity. And what's that? The rug's crooked? Well, then it's time to beat it. You drag it out to the line, hang it over a wooden pole, and start whacking it with a cane hoop that looks like a medieval badminton racket. Dust explodes into the air. Centuries of skin flakes, soot, and crumbs. You sneeze. You cry. You question everything, all before breakfast. Now, if you're not staff but a member of the household, you still don't get off easy. Especially if you're female. You may not be cleaning the grates, but you're still working. Victorian and Edwardian ideals were all about respectability, and that takes effort. Managing a household isn't leisure, it's labor wrapped in lace. First comes the list. You inspect the linen, check the pantry, assign tasks, dictate menus, supervise the cleaning, approve the floral arrangements, decide which teacups are appropriate for visitors. Are the good doilies out? Is the jelly set? Does the drawing room smell like death or roses? You're not allowed to sweat, but you're still running a logistical empire. Everything must appear effortless, even the effort. Let's not forget laundry. If it's laundry day, and it's always laundry day, it begins with water, buckets of it, hauled from the pump, heated in a giant copper boiler. Clothes are scrubbed with lye soap, rinsed 3 times, wrung out by hand, or in a mangle that looks like it was built to punish the wrists of the working class. White linens must be blued. Stains must be removed with lemon, chalk, vinegar, elbow grease, and prayer. Then it's all pegged to the line outside, where it flaps indignantly in the wind like surrender flags from a defeated army of cotton. If it rains, you start again. If it freezes, you bring in boards of stiff cloth like laundry-shaped ice sculptures and hang them over chairs until they thaw. And ironing? Let's not even talk about ironing. Flat irons must be heated on the stove. If they're too hot, they scorch. If they're too cold, they smear. If they fall on your foot, you die historically. And it's not just shirt, it's collars. Separate, starched, tiny, the cruelest little garments in history. Each one must be stiff enough to stand independently and sharp enough to qualify as a bladed weapon. And all of it is invisible labor. No one sees it. Unless you fail, then everyone sees it. Now let's say you're a man of the house. You've got it easier, of course, historically. But even then, there's no such thing as rest, because daily labor isn't just domestic, it's economic. If you're middle class, you're commuting, on foot, or by tram, or on one of those bicycles with a wheel the size of a windmill. You've got a bowler hat, a briefcase, and a packed lunch in greaseproof paper that smells faintly of yesterday's roast beef and class anxiety. You work at the office, or the bank, or as a solicitor, a clerk, a surveyor, an accountant. You write in ledgers. You do sums by hand. You use pens that require constant dipping and blotting and whispering threats. There's no email, no typing, no automation, just columns, numbers, ink, stress. You come home exhausted, smelling faintly of tobacco and ink dust. Your children want your attention. Your wife wants your approval. The fire needs tending. And your boots, your beautiful cracked leather boots, still haven't been shined. If you're working class, your labor is even more punishing. Maybe you're a delivery boy, hauling parcels across cobblestones for 10 hours in cheap boots with no socks. Maybe you're a factory girl, fingers raw from sewing sleeves in a shirtwaist production line where speed is survival. Maybe you clean trains or sweep chimneys or shell peas until your hands cramp. If you're a child, well, you're still working. Edwardian childhood is a luxury item. For the rich, for everyone else, it's a shorter version of adulthood with worse shoes. And yet the house stands. Through all of this, it stands. The bricks stay firm. The windows catch the light. The fire crackles, uneven but alive. The smell of baking bread sour, warm, and slightly burned drifts through the hallway. Because for all the labor, there's rhythm, a sense of ritual. Work, tea, worry, dinner, sleep, repeat. And while the work never ends, there is always the promise of something small at the end of it. A cup of tea poured properly, a chair that's been warmed, the moment when the last coal settles in the grate, and the house breathes out. Because in this world, you work hard, and the house, this impossible, crumbling, elegant thing, asks more from you than it gives. But still, it holds, it endures, and so do you. Even if your hands are raw and your shirt is stiff and the rug is still crooked, you are surviving history, one chore at a time. The fire has settled. The bread is cooling. The chores are momentarily quiet, which means it's time to think. And in a Victorian or Edwardian home, thinking doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a world saturated with belief. Faith, fear, morality, superstition, it's all here. Tucked between the gas lamps and ginger biscuits, every room, every corner, every ritual in this house is touched by something unseen. Let's start with the obvious. Religion. This house believes in God, or at least it pretends to, whether it's Anglican, Methodist, Catholic, Baptist, or just very polite about it. The house maintains a certain spiritual etiquette. There's a Bible in the drawing room, usually unread, but always displayed. Leather-bound, gilded edges, possibly a family name inside, possibly pressed flowers from a funeral no one wants to talk about. On Sundays, the family dresses up, not to impress God, necessarily, to impress the neighbors, because faith is as much about appearance as devotion here. Church is where you're seen, where you nod, smile, sing in a tone that suggests you can both read music and suppress doubt. The sermons are long, the pews are wooden, the air smells like wax, wood polish, and theological anxiety. But you go because skipping church isn't just lazy, it's suspicious. The kind of thing that leads to whispers, raised eyebrows, and gently worded letters from your aunt. Even the children are expected to know their place in the heavenly queue. Prayers before bed, grace before meals, the occasional stern reminder that Jesus is watching, especially when they're near the cake tin. But belief isn't always about organized faith. Sometimes it's about superstition. This house hums with it. The Victorians in particular were masters of quiet paranoia dressed up as respectability. By the time the Edwardians arrived, some of the edges softened, but many of the beliefs stayed tucked inside drawers, behind mirrors, beneath teacups. Did you hear a knock at the window with no one there? That wasn't the wind. It was an omen. 3 knocks at the window, someone in the house will die. A mirror cracked 7 years of bad luck, unless you bury the shards beneath a tree before sunset. Spill the salt, toss it over your left shoulder. A black cat crossed your path? Good luck or bad, depending on your postcode. There's a horseshoe above the kitchen door, nailed upright, naturally, so the luck doesn't fall out. You keep a sprig of rosemary on the windowsill to ward off sickness. You touch wood when you tempt fate. And no, you never, ever place shoes on the table, because that's just asking for death. Or worse, poor reputation. Victorian spiritualism, that fascinating blend of grief, hope, and candlelit seances, finds its way in here too. You know someone who knows someone whose cousin once received a message from the other side through a flickering gas lamp. You've seen the tarot cards kept in the writing desk drawer, wrapped in velvet, used only during thunderstorm. You've overheard the cook muttering about how the dog won't go near the scullery anymore and how that means something, and you've definitely been told not to open that one cupboard in the hallway. Not because it's haunted, just because it might be. Death hangs gently in this house. Not in a grim way, just as a fact, a presence. Every home in this period has lost someone, a parent, a sibling, a child, sometimes more than one. Epidemics don't knock, they march in, uninvited, and leave empty chairs at the breakfast table. So the house develops rituals. The mirrors are covered when someone dies, to stop the soul from being trapped. Clocks are stopped at the moment of passing, curtains drawn, black ribbons tied to doorknobs. Mourning clothes are worn for months or years, depending on your closeness to the deceased and how much fabric you can afford. You're not afraid of death, you're afraid of being improper about it. But belief here isn't only about the next world, it's about this one too. Victorian and Edwardian society runs on morality. Not because everyone is moral, but because everyone is performing morality. You are expected to behave, to speak kindly, to dress modestly, to use the right fork, and never, ever mention unpleasantries at the dinner table. There are rules for everything. Rules for mourning, rules for letter writing, rules for courtship, gardening, hat etiquette, and how loudly one should express surprise upon receiving news of an inheritance. And every one of those rules comes with judgment if you get it wrong. You may not know who wrote the rules, but you definitely know who enforces them. Aunts, neighbours, the postmistress, and of course, the house itself. You see, the house remembers every stain on the rug, every candle burned too low, every spoon that's gone missing from the silver drawer, and because you're here now, living in it, it expects you to follow the same codes, to believe, to behave, to belong, even if you don't. Even if you're just visiting, wrapped in borrowed wool and Victorian wallpaper, the house doesn't care. It has standards. And don't think the superstitions only linger in silence. They make noise. They creak through floorboards. They settle in the way you check under the bed. Without thinking, they echo in the sudden chill that appears in the hallway at 3:07 a.m. every Tuesday. And maybe that's why the gas lamps flicker sometimes. Not because of faulty fittings, but because someone, somewhere, wants to remind you that belief is still welcome here. That doubt can wait outside in the rain. That faith, however small, however cracked, however embroidered into an old lace handkerchief, is still part of the furniture. You sip your tea. It's lukewarm now. You look around the room and realize there are crosses stitched into the cushion seams, little charms hidden behind the fireplace tiles, an old key hanging from a nail near the door, labeled only "for her." And you begin to wonder, not whether it's Victorian or Edwardian, but whether the house believes in you. Evening has settled across the house. The lamps have been lit, the curtains drawn tight against the chill. Somewhere outside, a horse clops past on cobblestone, and someone's shouting in the distance. But inside, it's dinner time, which sounds simple, modern, ordinary. But in a Victorian or Edwardian house, dinner isn't just dinner. It's a production, a ritual, A performance choreographed by generations of manuals, etiquette guides, and extremely judgmental cutlery. You are not just eating, you are demonstrating civilization. Let's begin with the table. It is long, always too long for the number of people actually dining. It is dressed in white linen ironed to the point of nervous breakdown. The silverware is polished. The plates are stacked with the precision of a military campaign. There are more forks than you know what to do with. Above the table, a chandelier real or imitation casts a dim glow over the proceedings. Enough light to see the food, but not enough to recognize the family tension. A servant hanté, or, in smaller homes, a sibling with a towel over one arm, pretending not to be part of the family for the next 2 hours. The first course is soup. Always. It might be mulligatawny, or a clear consommé, or something green that tastes like wet fabric. You must not slur. You must not lean. You must not appear hungry, even though you absolutely are. Soup is followed by roast meats, mutton, beef, or game, depending on the century, the budget, and whether anyone in the house has recently committed to vegetarianism. Unlikely. The roast is dry, the potatoes are overcooked, the vegetables have been boiled into submission, but no one complains, because complaining is vulgar. Instead, you thank the cook, who isn't present, and make quiet noises of approval while desperately trying to chew without sounding human. Now comes the pudding, and here, pudding does not mean chocolate mousse or something soft and sweet. It means anything. Steamed sponge with raisins, boiled suet with mystery spices, something brown and wobbling that may or may not contain meat. You eat it anyway, because dessert isn't about flavor, it's about endurance. Then the cheese board, crumbly things, blue things, things that smell like regrets from the 1700s, followed, at last, by tea or port. The tea is bitter and strong enough to ruin your sleep. The port is passed left, always left. If you pass it right, the earth shifts, and at least 3 ancestors groan softly in their crypts. And all this takes hours, not because you're enjoying yourself, but because it's expected. Conversation, too, is a kind of performance. No politics, no religion, no money. Just safe, dry, pleasant remarks about the weather, the neighbours, and the recent improvements to the railway. Now, if you're upstairs, in a drawing room or parlour, and you're entertaining guests well, that's a whole other ordeal. You make small talk. You offer cake. The cake is dry. It is always dry. You nod politely through stories you've heard 3 times before and pretend to care deeply about someone's great-niece's toothache. The fire crackles. The teacups clink. Someone plays the piano, badly, with confidence, and someone else reads aloud from a novel no one understands, but everyone pretends to admire. In smaller homes, social life takes place in the parlour, also known as the one clean room that no one is allowed to actually use except for guests. The parlour has stiff chairs, a fireplace that smokes, and books that have never been opened, but it also has the family's finest possessions. A porcelain clock that hasn't worked since the Boer War, a taxidermied bird under glass, and a photograph of an uncle no one speaks of. Entertainment depends on class, location, and the number of candles left. In the Victorian period, it might involve a musical evening, which means someone sings a ballad about dying from consumption in a rainstorm, while the rest of you applaud awkwardly and sip lukewarm tea, or a charade night, where someone pretends to be Queen Victoria and someone else tries very hard not to laugh when someone else trips over a footstool. Board games exist, but they're complicated. Think less Monopoly, more how well do you know the Book of Common Prayer. By the Edwardian era, things begin to loosen slightly. There are card games, theatre outings, trips to seaside towns. You might visit a music hall, and watch a comedian perform jokes about trousers while balancing on a horse. You might attend a dinner party where the wine flows a little more freely, and the women speak without permission slip. But even then, formality reigns. The edges are softening, but they're still there. Now, let's say you don't belong to a family with a parlour, or a footman, or a roast. Maybe you're working class. Your dinner is simpler. A stew, a bit of bread, something boiled in a pot that's been bubbling since lunchtime. It smells better, tastes better, but no one claps politely after. Your social entertainment? The pub, loud, warm, full of smoke and songs and boots stomping against the stone floor. There's ale and gossip and a man named Alf who claims he once saw the Queen in her carriage and made direct eye contact with her horse. There's laughter, card games, cheap beer in tin cups, and a fire that never quite heats the whole room. And yes, children are there too. Not because they're drinking, but because childcare hasn't been invented yet. Outside of the pub, you've got the market. A place where entertainment, food, and argument blend into one chaotic, cobbled experience. You wander, you haggle, you lose your child for 20 minutes near the sausage stall. Or perhaps a travelling show comes to town, a puppet performance, a magician with questionable morals, a man who eats fire while his wife pretends to faint. You clap, you laugh. You forget for a moment that your boots leak and your ceiling still hasn't stopped dripping, because for a few hours, just a few, you are entertained, not in the grand, polite sense of dinner party storytelling, but in the real way. The way that makes you forget the draft behind the door, the hunger behind the smile. And no matter which version of the evening you live through, whether it's roast beef in the dining room or stew by the hearth, one thing is constant. You are tired. Not modern tired, but Edwardian tired, which is a combination of physical exhaustion, emotional repression, and the vague awareness that someone is definitely judging your manners from beyond the grave. And so you sip the last of your tea, you watch the candles flicker, and you brace yourself because dinner may be over, but night is just beginning. The house is quiet now. The fire has burned low, the dishes are stacked in the scullery, and the last boot has stomped up the stairs. But as you sit in the flickering lamplight, sipping what might be tea or might just be hot water with a guilty conscience, there's something else in the room with you, something cold, not from outside. Not the wind, not the draft beneath the door. It's a feeling. It's the quiet, persistent presence of illness. Because in a Victorian or Edwardian house, sickness isn't a seasonal inconvenience. It's a fact of life, and often a cause of death. You cough, and someone looks up sharply. You sneeze, and the room stiffens, because it could be a cold, or it could be consumption, or diphtheria, or scarlet fever, or typhoid, which came in with the water and left through the coffin. There's no such thing as a safe cough. Every symptom is a warning. Every flush of the cheeks is suspicious. You are always a little bit sick, and everyone around you is always a little bit worried. Medicine exists, of course, just not the helpful kind. There's a doctor somewhere in town. He wears a black coat, carries a leather bag, and smells faintly of pipe smoke and pessimism. You call him only when things are truly bad, because his visits are not free, and his methods are not comforting. He arrives, removes his gloves dramatically, and takes your pulse like it owes him money. He mutters, he squints, he prescribes something with mercury in it, and tells you not to worry while looking extremely worried. His bag contains the following: a thermometer made of fragile glass, a stethoscope that mostly just makes your chest cold, laudanum, because why not? And a collection of powders, pills, and tonics that are all equally useless and equally expensive. You may be told to rest. You may be told to bleed. Yes, bleeding. still happening. Leeches, knives, or just a bowl and bad vibes. Because clearly, if you're ill, it must be something in your blood. And what better solution than removing some? You're also told to try fresh air, so your bedroom window is flung open. In January, while you lie in bed with a fever and a hot brick for a pillow, wrapped in 17 wool blankets that smell like damp sheep and regret. Quack cures are everywhere. Tonics sold by men in bright waistcoats who travel town to town with a cart and a smile. They sell elixirs for liver complaints, lung rot, melancholy, and female nerves. They contain mostly alcohol, opium, or both. You feel better for a bit. Then you hallucinate that Queen Victoria is in your wallpaper. Then you pass out. If you survive the illness, congratulations. If you don't, well, there's a process for that too. Death here is formal. It has rules. The body is laid out in the parlour. The mirrors are covered in black cloth. The clocks are stopped at the moment of passing, and the family begins mourning. Real mourning, measured in months and layers of black crepe. A widow is expected to dress like a ghost for 2 years. A man mourns his wife for 6 months and gets a tie-pin. Children wear black armbands. Babies wear nothing, they're too busy dying of whooping cough. The local newspaper prints your obituary. Sometimes they spell your name right. The funeral is somber. The coffin is heavy. The horses pulling the hearse are draped in velvet. Neighbours send flowers. Some send cake. Because even death has etiquette. You return home, and the house is quieter now. One chair is empty. One photograph gains a ribbon. One room is closed off for a while, just until the air clears. And then life continues, because it has to, even in the face of constant, unrelenting illness. Even when you don't know what causes it. Even when you suspect the water, the air, the neighbours, or your own bad thoughts. You carry on. You brew tea. You boil cloth. You burn sulphur. You whisper prayers you don't believe while washing your hands in carbolic soap until they crack. You place a coin on your child's chest and hope the fever breaks. You hide the bottle of laudanum when no one's looking. You press your ear to your husband's chest in the dark and wait for breath. You learn not to ask questions when someone doesn't come back from the market. You hang sprigs of lavender in every room, not because it cures anything, but because it smells like pretending, and that's something. Because in a house like this, health isn't an expectation. It's a temporary condition. You don't live assuming wellness. You live managing risk. You eat slightly burned toast and hope it was enough. You boil milk that's already gone sour. You pick the mold off cheese and continue anyway. You wear layers to keep out the chill, and you pray the damp doesn't settle in your lungs. Because once it does, there's not much to be done. You'll be told to rest, and you'll know what that really means. The pillows will be fluffed. The broth will be offered, and someone will close the door gently, and listen, and wait. Because the house has heard it all before. The cough, the silence, the weeping. It remembers, but you're still here. You drink your tea. You pull the blanket tighter. You listen to the wind press against the window, asking to come in. And you say no, not tonight. Tonight, you survive. Morning again. The kettle's on. The curtains are drawn. The coal scuttle is empty. But no one has said anything yet. In the quiet rhythm of this house, family is everything. And Family Island. Complicated. You see, in a Victorian or Edwardian home, family life is not based on feelings. It's based on structure, on duty, on knowing your role and not trying to swap it for someone else's. At the center of this structure, the woman of the house. Not necessarily the most powerful, but certainly the most burdened if you are a wife, a mother, or even an unmarried aunt with a respectable side part and a secret fondness for brandy. Your life is full of everything except rest. Because even if you don't work outside the home, And most women in the middle and upper classes, don't you still work? Every hour, every room, every breath, you oversee the servants, if there are any. You manage the budget, you plan the meals, select the fabrics, order the coal, arrange the visits, answer the letters, and ensure no one's socks are publicly shameful. You do it all invisibly, because to do it, obviously, would be what? Vulgar, masculine, American. You keep the house running, and no one thanks you, unless you mess up. Then they notice, and if you're a working class woman, the work is doubled, maybe tripled. You clean other people's houses before cleaning your own. You raise your own children and someone else's. You scrub the stairs and still find time to boil cabbage into submission for dinner. There are no weekends, no rest days, no self-care, only aching feet and soap that burns your knuckles. And through all of it, expectation that you'll be sweet, that you'll be modest, that you'll be agreeable and thin, even while eating potatoes 6 nights a week and washing your hair with egg yolk because the chemist's shampoo gave you a rash. Now, if you're unmarried, that's another role entirely. The spinster. You live in the smallest room. You take care of your aging parents. You pour the tea, and everyone is vaguely uncomfortable around you because you have no husband, which means, in this world, no purpose. You become either a burden or a curiosity, or if you're lucky, a governess, which is like being a teacher, therapist, nanny, and scapegoat rolled into one. Your pay is low, your dignity is optional, your loneliness is assumed. Now, let's talk motherhood. It is sacred and relentless. If you are pregnant, congratulations. Now you get 9 months of vague advice, tight corsets, and whispered warnings about the dangers of overexcitement. You don't speak of it openly. You don't flaunt it. You certainly don't act like it's natural. And then, the birth, which is done at home, with midwives, or with a doctor, or with whoever happens to be sober and calm enough to catch the baby. Pain relief? If you're rich, maybe chloroform. If you're poor, maybe biting on a stick. You're told to stay quiet. Don't frighten the servants. Don't disrupt the household. Just bring forth new life with grace and modesty, please. Then the child arrives, and you start worrying immediately, because infant mortality is not a concept, it's a reality. The baby could die in the night, or from fever, or from milk gone sour, or from something no one can name. So you wrap them in flannel, you pin charms to their clothes, you boil everything that touches their mouth, you pray. And you don't ask too many questions, because sometimes the answers are worse than the silence. And what of children once they survive infancy? They are not pampered, they are not empowered. They are small, slightly damp adults with very specific instructions. Be quiet, be neat, be useful. You rise early. You eat whatever's put in front of you. You go to school if your class and gender allow. And you are grateful for everything, for anything, even when you're cold, even when the shoes don't fit, even when your younger sibling gets the better blanket because they cough in a more Victorian way. You are not supposed to have feelings, only manners. You write thank you notes with frozen fingers. You memorize poems you will never recite. You are constantly told that you are lucky, even if you are working by age 10. Especially if you are working by age 10, boys become apprentices, or factory hands, or chimney sweeps, if they're small enough and unlucky enough. Girls become maids, or seamstresses, or nothing at all, waiting for a marriage that may never come. And fathers, they sit apart from all this, at the head of the table, behind the newspaper, inside a fortress of earned silence. They work, they provide, they speak when necessary, and often, not even then. Affection exists but quietly. A pat on the shoulder, a nod, a softened tone during bedtime. You may never hear, "I love you," but you might get an extra spoonful of treacle on Sunday. That's enough. That has to be. Family, in this house, is a kind of choreography. Each person has their step. The music is tradition. The rhythm is survival. And the applause? It rarely comes, but still you move together through illness, through chores, through thick curtains and thin soup. And yes, sometimes through love. A kind of love that doesn't speak. It mends, it scrubs. It brings you a cup of tea when you don't ask. It sits by your bed when you're sick, pretending to do something else. It remembers how you like your bread toasted and does it wrong anyway, but tries, always tries. That's what family means here. Not ease, not freedom, but endurance. Wrapped in wool, bound by duty, and stitched together with silence. The sun has shifted. Longer shadows fall across the carpet, where a single chair sits askew just enough to suggest that someone left in a hurry or lost a silent argument. The house is still standing, but the tensions are showing. Afternoon brings more than dust motes and tea. It brings decisions, deadlines, dilemmas. Things that weren't spoken during breakfast now resurface in stiff shoulders and passive-aggressive offers of jam. This is the hour when polite society starts to crack, because underneath all the manners, the feather dusters, the quiet murmurs of, "Please pass the cream," there's something else. A structure, a hierarchy, a world built on order. And where there is order, there is also friction. Let's start inside the house. The relationships here are shaped by power, and power is never quiet for long. The master of the house, if he's home, is still technically in charge. But as the Edwardian period progresses, his authority is starting to fray. He's being questioned, softly, politely, through sighs and suggestions and the silent rebellion of a dinner that arrives 2 minutes late. The lady of the house keeps the schedule, keeps the peace, keeps the servants from murdering one another with pickle forks. But she is tired. Behind the lace and the pearl buttons, she is stretched thin by the expectations of grace and control. Because the servants, well, they have eyes, they have ears, they know who's arguing upstairs, and who's been sneaking down after hours to fetch just a little brandy. And they talk in whispers, behind closed doors, in the kitchen, in the scullery, out back by the laundry line. They know things the family does not, and sometimes they use it. The butler resents the new footman. The maid resents the lady's daughter for leaving hairpins everywhere, like she's sewing them into the carpet. And everyone resents the cook when she's in a mood, which is always, but you don't say it. You hold it like hot coal in your chest, because conflict in this house must wear gloves. It cannot shout. It must simply stew. And it's not just within these walls. Step outside, and the class divisions grow sharper. The cobbler's son is not welcome in the drawing room. The flower girl may be pretty, but not respectable. Even children are assigned categories based on who their parents are, what they wear, and how they pronounce the word tomato. You don't rise in this world. Not really. You stay where you were born. And if you try to climb, you are quietly, absolutely put back in your place. Sometimes through laws, sometimes through etiquette, sometimes through a simple refusal to acknowledge your existence. You might find work, but not status. You might earn money, but not access. Even among the wealthy, there's conflict. Old money versus new. The Victorian industrialist, with soot-stained wealth glaring across the parlour at the Edwardian aristocrat with inherited land and no plumbing. They despise each other, but they'll still meet for cards on Tuesday because social obligation outweighs loathing. Now zoom in further to the kitchen, the laundry room, the backyard. Women, especially, live in conflict with themselves. They are told to be delicate, but are expected to scrub floors, to be beautiful, but never vain, to be strong, but never loud. They are praised for being obedient, even when they burn with fury inside. A fury that often has nowhere to go but inward, so it becomes silent. Sickness, or a letter never sent, folded perfectly into a drawer behind the old gloves. Children fight too, in their own quiet, careful way. A shove in the hallway, a word whispered to mother at the wrong moment, a toy taken and buried in the garden. Sibling rivalry isn't just petty, it's primal. Because attention is scarce, resources are limited, and approval is the only currency that counts. Conflict exists at every level, between the genders, between the classes, between the generations, between the people who live in the house and the ones who serve it. And if that weren't enough, there are the rules, the endless, exhausting rules. Afternoon is when they suffocate. Should you write that thank you note now or wait until tomorrow? Is it rude to call on Mrs. Halford unannounced? Did you speak too much at lunch? Did your skirt brush your ankle when you bent to pick up your gloves? Is that new neighbor the right sort? These aren't just curiosities, they're social landmines. Step wrongly, and you are excluded. Not dramatically, just absent. No more invitations, no more nods at the market, no more seats saved at church. You become invisible, which, in this world, is worse than being disliked. Because being disliked means you exist. Being ignored means you've already lost. Now and then, a scandal breaks through the crack. A girl is found with a love letter she didn't burn. A boy is expelled from school for mischief involving fireworks and someone's undergarments. A neighbor's husband disappears for 2 days and returns with no explanation and a bad haircut. And the gossip spreads, not loudly, never loudly. It trickles, drips, coils through teacups and across garden fences until everyone knows and no one says. That is the Victorian and Edwardian way. To hurt without words, to punish with politeness, to hide conflict beneath embroidery and etiquette until it turns into rot behind the wainscoting. Still you carry on. You smile when required. You curtsy when necessary. You offer the jam with a hand that is perfectly steady, even when your heart is not. Because in this house, in this world, conflict doesn't explode. It lingers, like a cough no one acknowledges, like a stain no one mentioned, like a letter you read once, then burned in the fireplace slowly, watching each word curl into smoke. And maybe that's why the floors creak louder now, why the curtains seem heavier in the afternoon light, why the air feels thicker, not because of ghosts, but because of all the things that were never said and never will be. The last of the light has faded. The house is wrapped now in a kind of soft, uneasy silence. The kind that doesn't soothe, but wait. Candles are lit not for ambience, but necessity. You place them in saucers, holders, sconces. The flames flicker uncertainly, throwing long shadows against the wallpaper, which suddenly feels closer. Gas lamps hiss, oil lamps stutter, and everything creaks. Because night, in a Victorian or Edwardian home, is not just a time, it's a transformation. What was charming in daylight, lace curtains, carved wardrobes, hallways lined with portraits, becomes eerie after dusk. Everything is dimmer, everything is louder. Even your own breathing. You don't talk much at night. Not loudly. Voices carry differently. There's a superstition about raising your voice after dark. Something about attracting attention you don't want. You walk carefully now. The floors have shifted. They remember every footstep, every bad dream, every silent grief that ever passed down the hallway in slippers and sorrow. You go to your bedroom, the one with the warped window and the wallpaper that peels slightly in the top corner. You light your candle, and that's when you hear it, a door, softly clicking shut in a room no one entered, or a whisper, not a word, not a sentence, just breath. But you're used to it by now, because in this house the night is not empty. It holds everything the day tries to forget. Fear here is layered. You fear fire, a real threat. Always the house is dry, the curtains are thick, the carpets drink oil and coal dust like wine. One tipped lamp, one rogue ember from the grate, and the whole place could be gone before the family cat finishes blinking. You sleep with that fear every night, which is why you close the damper, lay the hearth rug flat, blow out the lamp with steady breath and careful hands. Still, the smoke lingers. Then there's crime. You lock the doors, all of them, not with a bolt, but with a heavy iron key that looks like it could open a castle or a secret passage. You check the latches on the windows. You close the shutters. You say, there's nothing out there, but you're not entirely sure. Because the streets aren't safe after dark. Not in cities, not in towns, not in the countryside either. There are thieves, there are drunks, there are people who ask for help, but shouldn't be let inside. You tell yourself it's quiet tonight, and you keep a heavy object beside the bed, just in case. But the fear that settles deepest, the fear that whispers to you when the candles go out, isn't fire, isn't crime. It's death, not the grand dramatic death, the slow kind, the quiet kind, the sickbed kind. You lie in bed, beneath blankets thick as guilt, and you feel the cold press in through the glass. You cough just once, and you wonder if it means anything. You try not to think about the room down the hall, the one that hasn't been used since Cousin Mary faded away in it, coughing every night at 2 a.m. and waking the whole house with her grief. They say they heard her say something, not words, just a name, not her own. And after she died, no one went in for a while, not because they believed in ghosts, just because it felt wrong. Now the wallpaper is peeling and the bed is still made, and no one ever opens the window. That's how a house remembers, with dust, with silence, with doors that don't open quite as easily as they used to. Sometimes at night, you hear footsteps on the landing, soft, careful, unmistakable. You sit up in bed, you listen, and you remind yourself, old houses creak, that's all. But sometimes the creaking follows a pattern. Left, right, Holzer, left again, like someone pacing. You hold your breath, you listen harder, and then it stops, and you wait, and you breathe again, because nothing happened, but also something did. Sleep doesn't come easily here. It never has. You shift in bed. You punch the pillow into something softer. You try not to hear the wind moaning down the chimney like it's mourning something too old to name. The mattress groans beneath you. The springs are older than your grandfather, and the blanket, for all its weight, cannot keep out the feeling that you are not entirely alone. Not haunted, exactly, just watched. Victorian houses were made to last, but they were also made to contain secrets, regrets, unsaid things. They're built with narrow staircases and rooms that don't quite align, and windows that let in more than light. You learn to live with it, with the whisper behind the wardrobe, with the cold spot near the window that never changes, even in August, with the cupboard that opens when it shouldn't, with the portrait whose eyes never actually follow you but seem to notice when you leave the room, because the past doesn't stay outside, not in a house like this. It lives in the walls, it breathes under the floorboards, it waits, and so do you. You curl beneath the blanket, you close your eyes, and you hope that when you wake, you'll still be in the same place, that the house won't have shifted again, just slightly, as it sometimes does, because in the dark, when all the fires have gone out and the silence grows teeth, this house is not quite yours. You belong to it, at least until morning. The fire has gone out, the candles have burned low, and you are still here, wrapped in wool blankets, pressed into the stiff embrace of a mattress that feels older than the alphabet, lying quietly in a room that smells like dust, iron, and memories. The house no longer creaks, it listens, because your day in this other world, this carefully painted, tightly stitched, coal-stoked world, is coming to an end. You've lived it now. Victorian, Edwardian, doesn't matter much anymore, because time in a house like this doesn't behave the way it should. It settles into the corners. It gets under your fingernails. It clings to your sleeves like cobwebs you didn't see, and it never leaves empty-handed. Let's take a moment to remember the life you've stepped into. You woke up in a room too cold for comfort, with blankets that scratched and a ceiling that stared back. You washed in water that bit your skin. You ate toast that was mostly charcoal and drank tea strong enough to varnish wood. You dressed in clothes that didn't want to be worn, laced, buttoned, pinned, and layered with expectations. You carried coal. You scraped grates. You ironed shirts with heat and hope and a little bit of prayer. You smiled when you weren't happy. You nodded when you weren't listening. You followed rules you never wrote. You lit fires, not for romance, but because you would freeze without them. You sat in parlors full of silence, entertained guests you didn't choose, and clapped for songs you didn't like. You boiled laundry. You boiled food. You boiled water. And sometimes you boiled with quiet, contained anger. You feared illness. You feared judgment. You feared the quiet ticking of the long case clock in the hall, because it meant another day had passed, and the house was still winning. And yet, you also saw the beauty. You ran your fingers across tiles painted by someone long forgotten, who still wanted the kitchen to feel like art. You watched sunlight bend through stained glass, casting pinks and greens across a threadbare carpet. You poured tea into a cup so delicate it made your hands feel careful. You touched banisters carved by hand, polished smooth by generations of fingers just like yours, tired, maybe, but still here. You felt what it meant to live in a home built not for convenience, but permanent. Not for speed, but for story. That's what a Victorian or Edwardian house really island. Not a building, a story, told in brick and timber, in oil lamps and coat hooks, in chimneys and coughs, in love that never spoke, and grief that never left. You were part of it, for just a while. And now, as the night deepens and the wind plays gently with the loose latch on the window frame, it's time to return to yourself, to the quiet room you're really in, to your soft pillow, to central heating and electric lights, and a bathroom with hot water that comes from a tap instead of a prayer. You don't live there. Not anymore. You don't have to wear corsets, or polish brass, or pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't. You live now in a time where toast is adjustable, where fevers don't always win, where grief is spoken out loud, and joy doesn't always have to wait for permission. And yet, you understand that world better now. The one with the bay windows, the iron boot scraper by the door, the strange bump in the floorboards where something once stood. You understand it because you've felt it. You've walked through its routine. You've crouched by its fires. You've listened to its silence. And you've survived it. Not just the labor, or the fear, or the hunger, but the stillness. The overwhelming hush of a world that whispered, always, don't speak unless spoken to. You did speak, in your way, with footsteps, with breath, with hands wrapped around chipped porcelain, and now it's time to rest, to let go of the soot-streaked past, to leave the gaslights flickering behind, to let the cold, quiet corners of that old house disappear into your dreams. Because you don't live in the past. Not really. You visited it, you honored it, and now you get to leave it. You don't have to wear stays. You don't have to hear footsteps in the hallway and wonder who they used to be. You don't have to eat pudding made from beef fat and hopelessness. You can just sleep, the real kind, modern, warm, safe. So tonight, as you close your eyes, and let your thoughts drift like chimney smoke on a still night. Remember, you don't have to wake up in 1895 or 1908. You don't have to scrub brass in silence or whisper to the ghost in the hallway. You don't have to boil sheets or fold sorrow into linen cupboards. You get to rest in a bed that's yours, in a time that's kinder. You made it. And so, sleep well.